Have you ever wondered why someone really falls in love with you? Beyond appearance or pretty words, what awakens that mystery called love? Today we are going to delve into one of the deepest enigmas of our mind, the unconscious reasons why someone can fall in love with us. And for that, we will explore the ideas of the famous psychiatrist, Carl Jung. Because according to depth psychology, true love only has two hidden reasons that we often don't even know about. But before starting, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications if you want to continue exploring the secrets of the human mind. Also, leave in the comments. What do you think is what really makes a person fall in love? How do you think the unconscious influences our relationships? We want to know your opinion and your questions for future videos. Most of us think that we fall in love because we find someone handsome, nice, or with similar interests. However, Jung teaches us that authentic love is much more mysterious and hides in the deepest layers of the unconscious. It is as if an unknown territory lives within us that pushes us to choose someone without us knowing why. That impulse goes beyond logic and enters the world of symbols and internal shadows. According to Jung, in each person lives a hidden part that he called the shadow, and also an unconscious aspect of our psyche that represents the ideal image of the opposite sex, the anima in men and the animus in women. When one really falls in love, what happens, without realizing it, is that we project parts of our own psyche onto the other person, as if they embodied something lost or desired within us. And this is where those two unconscious reasons appear why someone could fall deeply in love with you. The first, because that person recognizes in you a lost or ideal part of themselves, that unconscious image known as anima or animus. And the second, because you activate in her a process of inner transformation that pushes her on her path of self-knowledge, what Jung called individuation process. That is, falling in love is in truth an encounter with one's own soul represented in the other. These ideas may seem strange or even overly romantic, but they help us understand why some loves seem inevitable or so powerful. It is not just chemistry or coincidence, but a true call from the unconscious to find itself and, at the same time, transform. Imagine that you have an invisible mirror inside you, and when you fall in love, it is as if you see an ancient or secret part of your own soul reflected in the other. Therefore, the first deep motive of love is the projection of the anima, or animus, the internal representation of what we long for and sometimes what we have not seen in ourselves. Our unconscious recognizes in that person a symbol of our own totality. But what does this mean in simpler words? It means that we often fall in love without knowing it, with our own dreams, fears, and hidden desires. It is as if by loving the other, we are actually seeking to complete ourselves. And that gives love that strength that is so impressive and, at times, even painful. On the other hand, the second reason is related to the fact that love forces us, sometimes forcibly, to look inside ourselves. It confronts us with our own wounds, insecurities, aspirations, and limits. The romantic encounter can be a catalyst to change and evolve as people. Thus, love is not just being with someone, but a true path to self-discovery. But this story has many layers, and here an essential question arises. To what extent do we really choose who to love? And to what extent is our unconscious the one that chooses for us? How much of our relationships is dictated by those internal forces we rarely understand? Jung said that the unconscious exercises immense power over our lives, especially in love, where we project enormous expectations and secret desires onto the other person. This explains why many relationships start out as fairy tales and end as major conflicts, because deep down, we are not seeing the person as they are, but rather reflections of what we carry inside. So the mystery is twofold. On the one hand, love reflects us. On the other hand, it challenges us to grow. It puts us in front of aspects of our personality that we need to integrate and work on. According to Jung, this dynamic is a fundamental part of the process of individuation. That is, the path to becoming ourselves, uniting the conscious and unconscious into a more authentic totality. During this video, we will explore these two reasons in depth. We will analyze how projection shapes love and how the other becomes a silent master of our own inner journey. We will also discover why, sometimes, these projections can lead us to suffering, and how to manage them so as not to lose ourselves in relationships that only repeat old internal patterns. Perhaps an even deeper question arises here. If loving is, above all, finding oneself through the other, what does this say about our true emotional needs? Are we really looking for another person, or are we just trying to heal wounded parts of our own soul? Don't disconnect because, in the next parts we will dive deeper into this labyrinth of symbols, desires, and unconscious mysteries. Leave your ideas below. Do you think love is an unconscious game of mirrors? Have you ever felt like you fell more in love with what that person represented to you than with them? We will see that discovering this can not only transform the way we love, but also the way we understand ourselves. Because in the end, love is a mirror that reflects much more than the image of the other. It reflects the unfathomable mystery of our own psyche. Let's continue this journey to the heart of the unconscious and love. We already said that, according to Jung, a person can fall in love with you for two great unconscious reasons. The first is because he projects his anima or animus onto you, his ideal inner image of the opposite sex. But what exactly are these figures and how do they work in our relationships? Our collective unconscious, that enormous shared network of symbols and ideas that we all share as humanity, holds universal images that Jung called archetypes. Among them, the anima is the unconscious female image present in all men, and the animus, the unconscious male image that inhabits women. These figures are not specific people, but deep representations of what feminine or masculine means to each person. And although they live hidden, they greatly influence how we love, admire, or reject others. When a man falls in love, he is actually usually projecting his soul onto the woman. He sees in her the embodiment of all his feminine ideals, his muse, the dreamed beauty, the sweetness, or the inspiration. Likewise, the woman projects her animus onto the man, seeing him as her hero, protector, wise man, or masculine ideal. But in reality, that initial enchantment is with a secret part of themselves, materialized in the other. This explains why we often love as if hypnotized at first, because we are not seeing the real person, but rather reflecting our own loving and desiring soul. It is as if the person we meet were a mirror where we project our deepest dreams and desires. Only much later, when the relationship progresses, do we discover the real person with his lights and shadows. And that's where the real challenge begins. That's why Jung says that romantic love begins with a powerful illusion. But this illusion is necessary. It allows us to get in touch with hidden parts of ourselves. The initial infatuation, that spark that seems uncontrollable, is the expression of projection. The other person activates an inner symbol, and from there comes all that emotion we feel. Here it is essential to understand that these projections can be beautiful or destructive. They are like a bridge between us and our own soul. But if we do not recognize them, they can trap us in an endless cycle of idealization and disappointment. Because ultimately, neither man nor woman are really that archetypal vision. They are ordinary people with their virtues and defects. Therefore, many relationships wear out when the projection falls. Jung called this withdrawing projection. It is as if the spell ends and suddenly we see the other in their authentic humanity. And here real love can be born, based on acceptance, or a breakup can arise when we have confused the internal image with the external reality. Furthermore, when someone falls in love with you because they project their anima or animus onto you, they are unknowingly using you as a screen for their own dreams and shadows. However, this is not negative in itself, because it also turns you into a mirror that can help you discover hidden parts of your soul. Love can be, then, a kind of silent and revolutionary therapy, which forces us to see what we have inside. As this projection becomes conscious, the main process of individuation really begins. That is, the journey towards being more complete, integrating what was in the shadows, recognizing the parts that we had projected outside. Love and individuation are connected because they both push us to discover who we really are. Now imagine a simple example. Someone falls madly in love with you because they see tenderness, sensitivity, or strength in you that perhaps he or she cannot recognize in themselves. By idealizing yourself, you are actually celebrating a part of yourself that you need to integrate. Therefore, many times love is that impulse that brings us closer to forgotten or repressed aspects of our own personality. This can be a painful process when we do not understand what is happening. Because when the projection breaks and we see the real person, we can feel let down, like we've lost something. But the truth is that we have lost an illusion, and we have gained an opportunity to get to know each other better. An important question arises here for you, the viewer. How many times have you confused the ideal image with the real person? How much of your love has actually been a reflection of what you carry inside yourself? Think about your past relationships, about those intense passions that seemed impossible. Didn't they also hide an internal desire to complete something in you? Jung invites us to understand that this dynamic is common and universal. There is no shame in projecting because it is part of our human being, but there is profound growth when we begin to recognize it. Because every time we fall in love with someone, a part of ourselves asks to be seen, loved, and accepted. Therefore, the process of falling in love can be as chaotic as it is magical. No one has complete control over their unconscious, and projections are launched like invisible arrows loaded with ancient symbols and longings. But the more aware we are of these forces, the more responsible we can be for our love, and the less unnecessary suffering we cause to ourselves and others. In essence, the first hidden reason why someone may fall in love with you is because you unknowingly embody an unconscious image that person needs to feel more whole. You are, in a way, the mirror in which his soul is rediscovered. And here love becomes a stage where two unconscious people dance, collide, and sometimes recognize each other. Therefore, authentic love begins when this initial projection is integrated with the concrete reality of the other, accepting that we are all human, imperfect, and at the same time full of infinite internal possibilities. In the first parts, we have seen that the first unconscious reason why someone may fall in love with you is because they project their anima or animus onto you, a reflection of what they are looking for within themselves. Now it is time to delve into the second profound reason that Jung proposes to us. Love as a catalyst for inner change, as an awakening of the soul towards its own process of individuation. In a simple way, we can say that individuation is the path to becoming what we really are, a process of self-knowledge and integration of everything that lives in us, from the conscious parts to the hidden shadows. Deep down, we all long to be more complete, more authentic, and along that path, love can become a powerful force that drives us to face what we do not see about ourselves. And what does this have to do with falling in love? Actually, a lot. Because many times, whoever falls in love with you is unconsciously looking for the spark, the key or the mirror in you that will push them to know themselves better and transform their life. In that sense, love is no longer just a reflection, but an existential push. Imagine that inside you there is a room full of closed doors. Each important love that comes into your life has the ability to open one of these doors, showing something hidden that you need to integrate. A fear, a passion, a wound, an unknown virtue. That's why love can feel like an emotional earthquake. Because it removes very deep layers and invites us, sometimes forcibly, to look at ourselves with brutal honesty. In Jung's terms, the partner we love acts as a living symbol that awakens content from our unconscious, helping us advance in this process of becoming more ourselves. It's not just company or physical attraction. It is an inner call that forces us to evolve. Some relationships, in fact, seem to be designed more for our growth than for our comfort. This raises questions that we should all ask ourselves. What is this person showing me about myself? What parts of me are activated when I love or suffer for someone? What wounds, talents, or fears emerge in the midst of this relationship? Because if we see them, we can transform them. If we ignore them, they become invisible chains that bind us to repeated patterns. Another way to say it, we fall in love many times to move towards deeper self-love, integrating parts that we had left in the dark. Thus, falling in love is not just emotion and desire, but an unconscious act of transformation. That's why it can hurt so much and be so liberating at the same time. Jung said that relationships are mirrors that reflect the totality of our psyche, with all its conflicts between the mask we show, the persona, as he called it, and the deepest essence. Loving sincerely requires taking off those masks, leaving our comfortable zones, and looking squarely at who we are, without embellishments or self-deception. In this sense, whoever falls in love with you may feel, without knowing it, that being with you allows them to move on their path of self-discovery. Because you awaken dormant areas, confront your shadows, or help you see a new facet of your soul. It may be painful or beautiful, but it is always an opportunity to grow. Perhaps now you will begin to see that many relationships in your life, even the difficult ones, had that transformative function. Those connections that made you rethink who you are, that confronted you with your limits and insecurities, that removed old wounds. All of that was part of your own individuation process. According to Jung, only by going through these moments can we integrate more completely. Love thus becomes an emotional laboratory where very powerful ingredients are mixed: passion, fear, idealization, and above all, the urgency to transform who we are. Therefore, falling in love is not simply finding the better half, as the popular myth says, but rather finding a spark that awakens our true being. Sometimes that spark begins gentle paths of discovery. Sometimes it triggers internal storms that shake our entire structure. But in both cases, the deep purpose is the same: to encourage us to know and integrate what we have denied or repressed. And what can we do about all this? The key is awareness. When a relationship begins to shake you emotionally, when your world changes, instead of running away or resisting, you can ask yourself, what is awakening in me? What parts had I not seen or accepted? What wounds do I need to heal? Thus, love stops being just a passionate swing and becomes a tool for self-knowledge. Imagine, for example, that someone falls in love with you because they feel vulnerable at your side, and that vulnerability is something they had never accepted about themselves. Thanks to that relationship, even if unconsciously, this person has the chance to integrate that emotional part that they had hidden. Or think about who considers you their hero, because deep down they need to awaken their own inner courage. Loving allows you to get closer to a lost facet of yourself. So the second big reason someone can fall deeply in love is because you represent a bridge to their own transformation and healing. Sometimes with sweetness, other times with pain, but always with a message. Here is a part of you that you must recover, understand, or transform. Isn't it curious? Love, which we often think is just a feeling, can be a powerful call from our unconscious to grow. It is not only a reflection, as we saw before, but a force that pushes the internal doors to make us more complete. Thus you discover that loving consciously is accepting that not everything will be easy or perfect, but it can be deeply transformative. That beyond immediate pleasure there is an inner search, that of a more honest and total integration of who we are.
We have already explored the two big unconscious reasons why someone may fall in love with you. because they project their own ideal image onto you, and because without knowing it, they are seeking a profound change through the relationship.
Now, it is up to us to understand how to recognize these dynamics in real life, and, above all, how to move towards a more authentic and transformative relationship instead of getting trapped in unconscious and painful repetitions. It is important to know that, at the beginning, almost all loves are born with a great projection. It is inevitable. It is part of our nature. We are captivated by an ideal image that we have not yet integrated, and the other becomes a screen on which we paint our dreams. But over time, if we seek personal growth, we must slowly remove those illusory images and see the whole person, with their strengths and weaknesses. This process of seeing through the looking glass is not easy, because our projections are loaded with powerful emotions that blind us. We think that the other is perfect, or that they will meet all our needs. We may even think that without that person we would cease to exist, or our wounds will never heal. This is one of the dramas of unconscious love, which makes us dependent on a projection that would only live within us. Jung explained that the moment when the projection falls can be painful, because it is actually the fall of an illusion. There we begin to see the other as they are, and ourselves too. Many couples break up at this stage, unable to accept that what they loved was more of an internal image than a real person. But for those who follow, that moment is the beginning of true love, based on acceptance and a more complete knowledge of the other and of oneself. This change occurs when we recognize that what we look for outside is actually inside.
That the hero, the muse, the savior, or the salvation that we saw in the other are internal parts that we must awaken and heal for ourselves. Jung called this process integrating the shadow. Accepting the hidden, imperfect, feared, or repressed
parts of ourselves. Only then do we stop searching in others for what we must find in our own soul. For example, if you always look for protective partners, perhaps you should ask yourself, what insecurity or fear in myself am I trying to cover with that image? If you become obsessed with someone who seems very strong, isn't it because you need to activate your own inner strength? Or if you are only attracted to unattainable or problematic people, what emotional wound leads you to repeat that story? Reflecting deeply can free you from repeating the same patterns over and over again. This consciousness transforms the way of loving radically, because it stops being an unconscious search for completeness through the other and becomes a path of personal integration. Loving like this implies recognizing yourself as vulnerable, imperfect, evolving, and accepting the same from the other. It is accepting that no one can save you, but only accompany you on your own journey. And this is where love connects more than ever to the process of individuation. Because the relationship is no longer just to fill gaps or avoid pain, but to support mutual growth, to respect differences and, at the same time, promote the development of each one. It is a union of two unique paths that intersect and enrich, but without losing its independence and authenticity. This also helps avoid unhealthy dependencies. When you love from projection, you become dependent on the image you have created and feel that you cannot live without it. But when you love from consciousness, you know that the other is not your solution, but your partner on the path of being yourself. A relationship of necessity is transformed into a relationship of choice and freedom. But this does not mean that passion and desire disappear. Quite the opposite. They become more authentic, because they are no longer contaminated only by fantasies, but are sustained by reality and acceptance of who we are, without masks. The creative energy of the anima and animus still exists, but now integrated in a healthier and more conscious way. Here you can ask yourself, which parts of your partner do you think are real, and which are just dreams and projections? What do you need to heal in yourself to love more authentically? What patterns do you repeat in love that show you wounds that you have not yet integrated? Each relationship can become, thus, a teacher that teaches you about yourself, if you know how to listen beyond appearances. Let us remember that Jung said that only by becoming aware of our unconscious aspects can we break repeated cycles, impossible loves, and harmful dependencies. To love is also to open our eyes to our own darkness, and only when we integrate that shadow can we love more freely, without the burden of our old unconscious wounds. It is a continuous work, never completely finished, because the unconscious is enormous, and there will always be aspects to discover. But the more aware we are, the less slaves we will be to our projections, and the more authentic our bonds will be. Then we can get closer to a love that is not just a reflection or just hope for change, but a true relationship between two integrated beings that accompany and drive each other. Lastly, it is essential to have patience and compassion in this process. We cannot eliminate our projections overnight or force the integration of our shadows. It is a gradual path that requires honesty and self-acceptance. Knowing that loving is also walking within ourselves helps us to be less hard on ourselves and on others. In the last part, we will explore how to practically apply these ideas in relationships, how to transform love from unconsciousness to consciousness and individuation, and how this knowledge can change your perception of yourself and others forever. Leave us your comment. Do you think you have loved from projection or from consciousness? What have you discovered about yourself and your relationships? Because every experience, even the most painful, can be the gateway to a more authentic version of yourself. Now that you understand that true love not only reflects hidden parts of our soul, but also drives a deep transformation process, it is time to ask ourselves, how can we live our relationships more consciously? How do we make love stop being simply a reflection of our shortcomings and become an authentic path of self-knowledge? Jung invites us to embrace a more conscious love, which begins with an honest look at our own interior. It is about learning to distinguish when we are projecting something of our own onto the other person, and when, on the other hand, we are really seeing and accepting the other as a complete being different from us, with his or her own lights and shadows. This first step requires courage, because it means recognizing that many times what we admire, desire, or reject in others are aspects of ourselves that we do not want to see or accept. It's about doing an act of honesty with yourself. Am I loving this person for who they are or for what they represent in my own internal world? When you become aware of this, you can begin to remove those projections little by little, and thus open a space to really know the other person. See it without the masks that your unconscious has placed, and accept it as it is, with compassion and realism, just as you want to accept yourself. At this point, love is no longer just fascination or attraction, but also a deep act of respect towards the other and towards your own soul. Here, love becomes an encounter between two beings who recognize each other as companions on the path, not as saviors or ideal projections. Because one of the greatest learnings on the Jungian path is that no one can save you or complete you. Only you can do that inner work. The couple, then, is a mirror and an impulse, but growth is a personal responsibility. How can we cultivate this in everyday life? For example, when conflicts or intense emotions arise, instead of simply blaming the other person, you can ask yourself which part of you is reacting. Is it an old wound, a deep fear, a wish you didn't know you had? That question can transform a discussion into an opportunity for self-knowledge and a crisis into one more step towards your own integration. Furthermore, we can learn to recognize that not all of our loves must become eternal or perfect relationships. Sometimes a person comes to show us something of ourselves, to be a temporary teacher, and then it's time to move forward alone. Accepting this is also loving with maturity and awareness. Another key is to accept that truly loving someone means allowing them to be who they are, without wanting to change them to fill our own faults. To love consciously is to let go of the fantasy that the other will cover all your wounds, and to begin to heal them yourself from within. The relationship stops being a necessity and becomes a free choice based on respect and mutual cooperation. Thus, true love not only unites bodies and hearts, but also drives souls towards their maximum expression. It becomes a relationship where both can grow, heal, integrate their shadows, and develop their best version. It is not a fairy tale, but a deep process, sometimes hard and always enriching. Thanks to this more conscious vision, you can free yourself from always repeating the same stories of dependence, idealization, or suffering. You begin to love without hiding who you really are, leaving behind the mask, the persona that Jung spoke of. You discover that your relationships are a laboratory where, through each other, you experiment and transform, little by little, into someone more authentic. So ultimately, those two secret reasons why someone might fall in love with you, for unconscious projection and for being a catalyst for their own transformation, are not only a mystery, but also a great opportunity. An invitation to get to know each other and grow, to leave behind illusions and live a more sincere love, which connects with your essence, and also with that of the other. Imagine how different our lives would be if each of us took this journey as a continuous process of self-knowledge. If instead of seeking to complete ourselves outside, we dug inside to discover our wounds, treasures, and shadows. If instead of idealizing or fleeing, we learned to integrate both love and pain into our personal history. This is a profound invitation to transform your relationships into a conscious path of healing and integration. Not to flee or idealize, but to look at your own projections and recognize the other as a partner who reflects and activates your most important journey, finding yourself. It is true that this process can be uncomfortable and even painful at times, because it forces us to abandon perfect stories and look directly at reality, inside and out. But it is also a path towards truer freedom and love, where we do not depend on others to complete us, but rather share our most authentic selves. Thus, love stops being just a painful or illusory mystery and becomes the most powerful force of self-transformation and inner freedom. We accept the totality of who we are and also the imperfect humanity of the other. From there, we can build more conscious, healthy, and deeper relationships. Before finishing, I want to invite you to leave your reflections in the comments. Which of these ideas about love and the unconscious resonated most with you? Do you feel that any relationship has prompted you to this process of self-discovery? Your experience can help others on their own journey. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell so that we can continue exploring together these fascinating ideas from Jung, deep psychology, and the secrets of the unconscious in our relationships and our self-knowledge. Because this is just the beginning. Every step you take towards understanding yourself better illuminates a little more the mystery of the mind, emotions, and love. An endless journey towards your own wholeness. And remember, love, more than searching outside, is a path to rediscover yourself inside. And from there, build more sincere, free, conscious, and transformative bonds. See you in the next video, where we will continue exploring this fascinating deep psychology focused on the unconscious, interpersonal relationships, and mental dynamics. Because self-knowledge is the most important adventure of your life.